how would you decide who the most dominant supercross champion is? And by dominant, I don't mean best rider. I mean the person who dominated their championships more than anybody. It's not about how many championships they won. It's about how much better they were than everybody else. Maybe by how many points they won by over second place. Maybe their competition, seeing how good their competition was, how bad their competition was. Well, I have a method that I haven't really seen anybody talk about. Over the past couple years, Supercross has been putting the average finish of each rider. They do it throughout the season, and then you can look at it at the end of the season. And something that's been really interesting to me is seeing the average finish of the champion. So for example, last year, Webb had an average finish of 2.8. He was in between second and third place on average. So that really interested me, and I wanted to see what the average results were for all Supercross champions, because I feel like that could be the best determination in figuring out who the most dominant Supercross champion is. So it didn't go back very far for average results, so I had to go back and calculate it myself. So I made a spreadsheet, and I put the link in the description to this spreadsheet of the result of every champion all the way back to 1974. So if you want to look through the spreadsheet with me, I'll have it on screen anyway, so you don't have to. But if you want to go back later and look at what I did to come up with this, more than welcome. So I have every year. So there's 2019 all the way back to 1974. First champion, Pierre Carmichael. No idea if that's how you say his name. So I went through here and I put the result of every, champion. I didn't do every rider all throughout the years. I did do some of the top three. And then once I was done with that, I put their points, and then I put their average finish. And then if they had an average finish between first and second, I gave them green, because I feel like that is the best determination of a dominant championship. If you're between first and second, that means that most likely you are winning every single race. And if not, you are most likely getting on the podium, and probably not worse than like a fifth place, and maybe only one time in the season. And then in yellow, I have between second and third, as I feel like that would be a decent result. And then in red, I have over third. I feel like if somebody got over third place as an average result, that either the competition was really stiff or they weren't that dominant of a champion. So yeah, green is dominance. Okay, so from here, I kind of took this information and grouped it down a little bit, I guess, if that's the right way to say this. So if you go into this next sheet in here, so what I did with this data is that I put all the different type of champions together, and I ordered it by year. So you have all the greens and all the yellows and all the reds. So we can see through this data that there's more yellow championships than anything else, meaning that more often than not, there wasn't a dominant champion, especially if you put the red with the yellow. If you put this red with the yellow, then you can really see that there is way more non-dominant championships than dominant championships. But we want to figure out who is the most dominant champion. So from here, I took each champion and I grouped them by how many championships they got in each category. I grouped all of the green champions first, and then yellow, and then red. And I feel like that is the best way to rank dominance, I would say. So going into this, I thought for sure it was going to be Jeremy McGrath. I mean, he's the king of Supercross. There wasn't anybody better than him, right? But when you go down to this other sheet of who is the best champion, we see Ricky Carmichael is the most dominant Supercross champion. Doesn't mean he's the best Supercross champion. Don't take that out of context. He obviously didn't get as many Supercross championships as McGrath or wins. So he's not the best Supercross champion. But out of his championships, he was more dominant than anybody else. He's the only one that had this 3 in the green. And then he had 1 in the yellow, and he actually had 1 in the red, and that's 2006, his last year. Reed and Stewart tried to take him down, and they couldn't do it. They all finished within 2 points of each other. That's crazy. So Carmichael is, in my eyes, the most dominant champion. And you can look at this graph yourself and see the ranks. McGrath did end up being second because there was multiple people with 2 super dominant championships, but he had more than any of those guys. He had more in the yellow, and I think that's a good indicator of him being a little better. And then from there, yeah, you can see my rank going all the way down. So I do have to say real quick that Jimmy Ellis and Pierre Carmichael, I should put an asterisk next to their name because they had a super short season. If you go back to results by year and you go all the way to the bottom, Pierre only did 2 out of 3 races. So really, he probably shouldn't even get a 1.5, but I'm saying this is out of finishing, how good you did. And then Jimmy Ellis only had 4 races. And just to point out, if you look up to see if anybody's had a perfect supercross season, says nobody has. Says McGrath was the closest. He got 1 second place. But they say nobody got a perfect season. But if you look, I mean, it was only 4 races, but Jimmy Ellis had a perfect season. So somebody needs to rewrite all of these internet pages that say nobody's had a perfect season. Because right there it shows Jimmy Ellis has. Okay, and then I have another argument of why I think Carmichael is the most dominant champion. So if you go through this list, there is Pierre, whatever his last name is, Jimmy Ellis, and Rick Johnson. Now, Carmichael never raced against those 3 dudes, but he has more championships than all of them combined. So I think he's a little bit better than they are. So you can get rid of those guys for saying they're the most dominant champion. And then Dungey. Dungey's a little harder to argue against because Carmichael never raced Dungey. But they have, well, I guess not. Carmichael has more championships, but with Dungey, I feel like you can't say that. However, with Dungey, he couldn't beat Villopoto. So right there, that shows that he is not the most dominant champion because the only reason he got those super dominant championships is because Villopoto was gone. And also, just to go along that point, if you look, Villopoto had no dominant championships. They were all yellow or red. And do you know why? It's because he had Dungey to compete against him. He couldn't just flat out beat Dungey every race. And so Villopoto never had a super dominant championship. Just an interesting point. But then back to my first point. All that leaves now is Stewart, Reed, and McGrath. So the reason that Carmichael is more dominant than those 3 is because, granted, McGrath was on his way out. He was getting a little older. But Carmichael dethroned the king. Carmichael beat McGrath in 2 seasons, I want to say. So right there, him dethroning the king makes McGrath not be on the list anymore of dominant champions because he couldn't beat Carmichael. Although when Carmichael was younger in the big bike class, in the 250 class, he did beat him. So, I mean, you can argue either way. And then with Reed and Stewart, they could not dethrone Carmichael. They tried. In 06, Carmichael's final season, I already said this, but they all finished the season within 2 points of each other. Carmichael had, what did he have? In 06, Carmichael had 338 points, and Reed and Stewart tied with 336. And that gave Carmichael an average finish of 3.13. But they couldn't dethrone him. And because of all those reasons, I say that Ricky Carmichael is the most dominant champion in Supercross history. You guys might have a different opinion, and I want to hear your opinion and your argument why. I have this spreadsheet set up to allow comments, so you can comment on here. You can comment in the YouTube video. It's all good. If I made a mistake and you guys find it, go for it. And I also want to hear your guys' opinion on why these, how many riders are there? 8 riders were dominant in their championships. Was it because their speed was just so much more than everybody else's? Or did they not have the competition to deal with like some of these other championships had? I think you could argue that a lot of these yellow and red championships were because the competition was so fierce and there were so many riders winning that you just couldn't be a dominant champion. For example, with Dungey, once Villopoto left, he became a dominant champion until his last season, which was, I don't even remember what year that was. Until his last season in 2017, he got a 2.5 as the average finish. And that's because in 2015 and 16, he had Roczen and Tomac. But Roczen and Tomac were still pretty young at that point. They weren't these full-grown, mature 450 riders that they are now. And that shows with his 2017 finish, because it wasn't dominant, because they had gotten faster and could actually compete with Dungey. I want to hear your opinion on why you think those seasons were so dominant. Was it something I said, or do you have something different? I want to know. And then finally, just real quick, I have the current championship. So right now, Roczen is leading the championship with 113 points over Tomac. And his average finish right now is a 2.6. That's not bad, but I'm curious of what you guys think. Will Roczen keep this championship? Will he keep this red plate going all the way to Vegas? And if he wins, does he have a green, yellow, or red championship? And if somebody else decides they want to step it up, like Tomac, does he win with a green, yellow, or red championship? I just want to hear your guys' opinion. That's all I have to say. When this video comes out, it'll be the morning of San Diego. I think it's San Diego this weekend. So if you're watching this tomorrow on Sunday, I will have a recap video up of San Diego, of the race. So be sure to check that out. And leave comments, do all that stuff. And hope you liked this video. It just snowed like a foot. So still going to be a little bit till I actually get on the bike to do on the bike videos. So it's going to be some more of this. Let me know if you like these videos and if you want more. And I'll see you on Sunday.